So Town of Trophy Club has put together, and I should say there are a number of town council members here today, so thank you all for being here. There is a POW MIA obelisk that has been installed right across the walking path from the service dog statue next to the flag that honors the veterans. There's a bunch of bricks around there that have veteran names on it, and there's still bricks there if you want to honor a veteran by getting their name on it. What's going on? New arrivals in the back. You can squeeze in. We'll find a spot for you. We haven't decided. We don't have a date to announce yet. But watch the town social media, and we will put the word out. There are. I pulled a list from the Texas Veteran Commission. There are 100 veterans that are missing in action from the Vietnam War alone, and we would like to read all 100 of those names when we dedicate that POW MIA monument. So thank you, Dennis, for reminding me about that. Other announcements. We meet here the second Saturday of every month, and anyone is welcome to come, 9 a.m. Sir?
Yesterday we had a memorial.
I had extended an invite to John Glover. Maybe he'll be able to come next time. Hospice provides end-of-life care for mostly elderly, some people that have terminal illnesses. There are veterans that are in hospice that are in our zip code that don't have any family, right? So they rely on volunteers to come and sit with them for an hour a week as they end their life. Certainly no one, but particularly no veteran should die all by themselves. So I'm going to volunteer for this organization. You have to go through a little screening process to be a volunteer, and then I will pass that information to everybody else. Anybody that wants to volunteer, it's not like you have to go every week, but you can get on a list, and then they can call you, and if you're available, you might be able to go and sit with someone and make a difference in their life as their life ends. So, anything else? Then Rachel, I'm going to turn it over to you. Rachel, come on up here. Rachel, I met Rachel through a mutual friend. A lot of the work that Gallant Few does, we rely on people telling other people about us. And in this case, a mutual friend of ours told me about Rachel. And so we invited Rachel to come out and go climbing with us. And she's been out several times to do that. And so we asked her if she'd be willing to tell her story. And we told her there are only going to be 2 or 3 people there. So it's going to be no stress at all. So I know that she's a little bit anxious about doing this, but you're going to do great. And we're going to love hearing your message. So I'll turn it over to you, and I'll quit talking.
Alrighty. Like Carl said, my name is Rachel. I was in the Coast Guard. Like you, I went to boot camp in March 20th, 2012. Before I graduated high school, went to college, got my bachelor's. It was during the recession, so my older brother was like, hey, you should just join the Coast Guard. It's a great idea. And so that's what I did. And never looked back. Thought I would do 20 years. And God had other plans for my life. What can I say? All right. So I went to boot camp March 20th. It's in Cape May, New Jersey. It's 8 weeks. And before I went, my brother told me, he's like, Rachel, every time you think, not that I hate this, but like this is so hard, just remember, it's just a game. They're just playing mind games with you. And they do. And he's in aviation, so he would fly over, he would write me notes, and he would be like, oh, I flew over Cape May today, saw some companies out there. And just having that was so nice to know that. Sorry. My big brother was there. So, but that was when I graduated from boot camp. He presented me my certificate. That was one of my company commanders. One of the guys in our boot camp was from Hawaii, so his family brought Lay's for everyone. And like you, Jamie, I thought it was funny. You introduced yourself by your last name. At graduation, my mom kept saying, Rachel, 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 and I wasn't responding. And so my brother goes, call her Devries and she'll respond. And as soon as she said Devries, I was like, So you get used to just not hearing your first name. After boot camp, I went to Seattle, Washington, where I was on the Polar Star, also known as a polar roller. The bottom of the ship is basically shaped like a football, and it does this instead of like moving like a normal ship. It goes to Antarctica to break ice for the like container ships so they can get to McMurdo to restock it. We stopped in, when I got there, it had been in dry dock a long time. Dry dock is where they do all the repairs to the boats. And we did the sea trials to the Arctic. So stopped in Nome, Alaska. That's also where the finish line to the Iditarod is, if you know what the Iditarod is. Just some friends from Hard Hats for my life on that boat. Then I went down, after our sea trials, I made the patrol down to Antarctica, stopped in Australia, and I got orders to my specialty school. So I flew home from Australia to then go to Petaluma, California to go to my specialty school. At the time I was married, so once I got done with my specialty school, I had to go back to Seattle, and then I transferred. I got a picture with a real life koala. This one thing for me when I was in was my brother pinned me every time I made a pay grade. He was, by the time I made third, he was pretty jaded, and so it wasn't a big deal to him, but it was a big deal to me, and since it was a big deal to me, he made it a point to always be there every time I advanced. So this was when I advanced to E4 right after school, and then I went to Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, which I don't know if any of you know where Sault Ste. Marie is, but it's in the Upper Peninsula. Every day I went to work, I could see Canada. It gets negative 35 there. It's a great time. I'd encourage anyone to go. But this was one of our small boat stations. I was a yeoman, so I was a paper pusher. I was the person you came to when you were going to PCS, if you got married, if you got divorced, if anything with your pay changed, I was the person you came to. And so I would visit units to introduce myself, see if they needed anything. I also dealt with life insurance, so we would visit every unit to make sure they were filling out the paper correctly. In Michigan, we had a lot of deaths, so it was important that the life insurance was filled out correctly. I did a lot of volunteering with the VFW, American Legion, United Way, domestic violence when I was in Michigan. And this was a lady I met while at the American Legion. Great lady. I don't know. But Michigan was probably by far one of my favorite units. Then I went to Charleston, South Carolina. As a non-rate, I loved being on the boat. I love the camaraderie. On land, it's different. It's you go to work and then you go home. When you're on a boat, you have that connection, and it's just different. And so once I went to Michigan, I was like, man, I really want to go back to a boat. So then I went to the James, which is the one on the left. They do drug interdiction, so we would go through the Panama Canal into the Pacific, and we would. So my brother, being in aviation, their helos or their airplanes would go over, spot a panga, and then tell us on the boat where the panga was, and we would then deploy our small boats and shoot out the engines. We also had a helicopter on board that would shoot out the engines, and then we would get the people off board and all the drugs. Shortly after I got there, I'm 85, so my brother came out for that. And this is after a patrol. We would put bales on bales on bales of cocaine on the flight deck, and then we would always pull into Florida. and then the FBI would come on board, and we'd always take a picture. I didn't have the picture, but the crew would line up in between the bales, and we'd take a crew picture and then help them offload it. Oh, and there's the helo we would take every patrol. This was outside Panama. I love being underway. One thing I was telling Zach last week, one thing about boot camp was I found such peace. We would be out there right before bedtime, and we'd be doing push-ups and sit-ups and just getting PT'd, and you could hear the waves crashing, and there was just a peace to it for me. And ever since then, the ocean it's been very comforting. The power behind it is obviously deadly, but it's a very peaceful place for me. And yeah, I don't know. If you ever get the chance to go on a boat, I would recommend it. This was my last patrol on the boat. Just a few of my friends, and then more. One thing that was big for me was a lot of people in my rating would always say, oh, well, it's members' responsibility, and I hated that with a passion because I was the subject matter expert, like they like to say, and I always hated how people would shove their work off onto other people, and so it got to the point on this boat that people were like, oh, just go to Rachel, she'll help you, where the other person wouldn't. So I loved my job, I was good at my job, and even after I left units, people would still contact me because I cared, and that's one thing I miss, is having that relationship with the people I served with. This is just a random picture I took on the James. And then after the James, I went to Seattle. So when I left the James, it was the summer of 2020. My last patrol started in January of 2020. While we were underway was when COVID happened. And I'd like to preface this story with, it's okay to think, oh, she's one of those people. So, January 2020, we got underway. Halfway through the patrol, COVID became a thing. We got back. There were all these protocols for when we got back, and like people were nervous about seeing their family and all this other stuff. And then shortly thereafter, I transferred to Seattle. Seattle was very strict about COVID, and then in my head, I was like, when it becomes mandatory, this is something that I will do. I will do what is asked of me. I will get the vaccine, and I will do it. And then in August of 2021, it became mandatory. And because of everything I knew about my family's medical history and what I had learned from other people and what I had read, I just didn't feel comfortable getting the vaccine for myself. And so in August of 2021, I started the process for a religious exemption, and it was due November 2021. I got my denial back in February of 2022. My end of enlistment was January 2nd, 2023. So I knew if I could just get to January 2023, I would get an honorable discharge. Like, I wouldn't have to worry about the repercussions that they had been talking about. And so I got my denial back February of 2022. I submitted an appeal, got that denial back in April, and then I had tested well enough for E6 to where I was on the list to make it June of 2022. And my command wanted to frock me, so let me start wearing it mid-May. So I was frocked for E6 in mid-May, and then like 2 days before June 1st, they came out with a message saying, if you want to take if this person advanced and you want to take it away from them, you can take it away from them. Thankfully, my command liked me, and they told me that they weren't going to take away my advancement because I was a hard worker, I put in my time, and so they let me remain an E6. I became one of the supervisors in the office, and I did my job up until the end because I cared about the people. Whereas I had multiple supervisors above me come up to me and say, I appreciate you that you still do your job, because so many people in your position would have stopped so long ago because of what you're going through. And that pushed me to keep going. Going through this gave me a completely different look or outlook on the military. If it wouldn't have been for this group, the transition out of the military was hard. It was really hard. And in those circumstances, it was even harder because I felt so much shame from my choices. It ruined relationships. It was in a way earth-shattering to go through that. And like I was talking to Zach and Carl last week, and everyone that gets out, at some point you're gonna, depending on why you get out, you're gonna feel some sort of, or potentially you're gonna feel some sort of shame or like regret, or just, there's just so many emotions that I never thought that I would have. I thought it was gonna be easy. Like, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna get out, I'm gonna get a job, and it's gonna be fine. It was a lot harder. And I think last month you said like when you join the military, the civilian side doesn't prepare you to go into the military, so why do you expect the military to help you prepare to go back into civilian life? They try and help you in certain aspects, but it's depending on how long you were in, it's so different. And I have, now knowing what it was like, I am so thankful that what happened, and I 100% believe that God has a purpose for my life, and staying in the military was not one of them, and that is why He put the roadblocks in place where He did, because I would have stayed in for 20 years. Like, that was my plan, to stay in for 20 years. And there were so many times also that I was like, just do it, Rachel. It's not that big a deal. Just do it. And I just couldn't. Yes. So then I got out. I moved here with my brother. He was like, I have an extra room. Just come down to Texas. So got here late October. Had Thanksgiving with one of his friends. His friend, I think, could tell the need I had to be around people who had similar experiences as I did, and so he introduced me to this group, started climbing with them, and it has been so nice to have the support system. They will just have the conversation, like it sounds silly to say, they'll take the time just to have a conversation, to talk. And the first time I met with Tony, our meeting was supposed to be 30 minutes, but he ended up talking to me for an hour, and that meant so much to me, just to know that he wanted to take the time to get me where I needed to be, and they cared about my mental health, and like just me as a whole they cared about. One question I was asked recently was, what would I have told my younger self when I joined? And for me, that would have been, don't make the military your life. I made it my life so much so that getting out made it so hard, because that's what I knew. All my friends were in the military, and whereas that's great, when you go to get out, then it's just a slap in the face, because you're just like, I haven't prepared, I haven't networked, I haven't done anything to help my transition out of the military to where I can become a civilian again. Enjoy your time, but also know that there is life after the military, and you have to be cognizant of like what you want to do when that time comes. I think that's, yeah. Well, and then, so they took the mandate away in December. They called me and asked if I wanted to come back onto active duty, and because of everything that I have seen since I started terminal leave, I decided not to, because I don't want to have to do this in another 9 years. But yeah, that's it. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So you said it's very difficult when you got out. What do you think, what was the most difficult thing for you that made the transition difficult?
Thankfully, I had a support system. I couldn't imagine doing this without having a support system. I'm so thankful to my brother.
Would you say
It's just like, so if you plan on getting out and if you're gonna get out and you're gonna have to have a career afterwards, because in the military, you take a test, you do a board, and then you advance if you rank high, or like based. And so you're not in the military and you're networking on the civilian side. So when you get out, you have to start networking, you have to put yourself out there. So I think that was the hard part, is having to, if you're good at that, great on you. I'm not. But putting yourself out there to network and doing like Chamber of Commerce, or putting yourself out there so that you can meet people, because it's all about networking to get a job, and it's all in who you know. And so that is one thing that was difficult to me. And if you've never had a real job before you joined, thankfully I did, to where you had to have interview skills, resume building, like those were all things that thankfully I had done, but they had changed in the last 11 years. So it's adapting to, you'll get great at adapting also. It's adapting to your surroundings, and yeah, I would say that's, yes.
So how many years total did you spend with the military?
So this March would have been 11 years. Yep.
Do you feel like that, you not accepting the COVID vaccine, that definitely had a negative impact on your career, do you think?
Well, I mean, I had to get out because of it. If that wouldn't have been there, I would have done 20 years. So.
What are you doing now, Rachel?
Oh, now I actually work for Closets by Design. In a week, I start my project management certificate with Syracuse University, and I actually have an interview on Tuesday with Caterpillar. So it can be done. You just have to want it bad enough. Yes?
So I see that you're like very emotionally attached to the military, so I was wondering like what was the most like rewarding thing or like feeling that you had like while you're in it?
I am. I think for me, because I loved my job so much, knowing that people at my unit knew they could come to me and I wouldn't turn them away was the most rewarding. Because when I say people in my rating would turn you away because they didn't want to help you, or they felt they were too busy, or whatever the reason they had, they would turn you away because they didn't want to help you. And so it was rewarding to me to know other people at the unit were like, oh, just go to Rachel, she'll help you. So I took pride in my job, and you don't see that as much anymore. So just, it was rewarding being good at my job. I loved the people I worked with for the most part. It's like any job. Yeah. You make a lot of friends. So.
Rachel, we have a tradition. I want to give you one of our gallant few coins. Thank you for being a speaker. There were, we're going to get a shot?
Not that good. Okay.
Well, a couple of things that you said I wanted to kind of circle back around on. How many times did she say love when she was talking about the people that she worked with and the Coast Guard? It was a lot, right? That's why it's so hard when you get out, because you're just embedded in this. You love what you do, you love the people you're with, but it goes a step further, because if one of them was in danger, you would put your life in front of theirs. Right? That doesn't happen at Caterpillar. It doesn't happen any place, maybe if you're in law enforcement, but it doesn't happen anyplace else. And you all are getting ready to walk into that world, right? You will experience this tightness, this love, this brother and sisterhood that you don't get on the outside. And then when you leave, it's like you didn't even realize how important it was to you, now it's gone. So reconnecting with the community of veterans is one of the most important things you can do when you get out, but it's the last thing you want to do, because in many cases you feel guilt and shame about things that either happened or didn't happen while you were on active duty. I should have done this, I should have done that, right? And one of my friends says, when we say that, what are we doing? We're shooting all over ourselves. So he says, we got to stop shooting on ourselves and things will get better. You were going to say?
Well, last week when we were talking, Carl had mentioned how when you got out, you felt like you couldn't talk to the people that you were stationed with. And that is something that I'm still dealing with, is not feeling like I can talk to the people that I was stationed with because of the reason I got out. Yeah.
One of the most healing things that happened to me, when I left the military first, I had guilt and regret because I had the dream job taken away from me and given to another officer, command of a ranger company. So I got my feelings hurt and I left. And I felt like I was on the Cowboys team and they were really about to win the Super Bowl, and then I quit the team. I mean, that's how I felt. And so I didn't talk to them for a long time. 20 years later, I met the guy who gave the job to somebody else. And he gave me a big hug. And he pulled me back into his circle. And it was, at that time I realized that he didn't do it because he didn't like me or hate me. He did it because he felt that was the right thing to do at the time, right? And it washed all the other stuff away. But if I hadn't put myself in a place to talk to him, then I never would have had that healing experience. So it's important to do that. The other thing that I wanted to say is you all get, this is my old wisdom. I was in the military back in the 1900s, I like to say. So my wisdom to you, one of the number one things that you can do as you go in is start saving money, right? Many of you have never had that job first. Now you're going to get a paycheck every month if you go into a hazardous duty area or do a job that gets hazardous pay, you're going to get extra money. Don't go buy a new Firebird or Trans Am or, gosh, I'm focused on Pontiac now.
Can I weigh in on that?
Yes, sir.
Don't borrow any money while you're at it. There is no reason. The money shows up every 2 weeks, like clockwork, and there are vultures outside the base. They sell all kinds of crazy crap, and it sounds like a good deal because you have cash and they'll keep you credit. I got out of the military with over $80,000 in the bank. I was enlisted. I was a nuke submariner, got extra pay, as Paul's describing. Don't borrow any money. I didn't borrow one penny while I was in. I watched my friends get their cars repossessed. I watched them go through all kinds of mayhem from overborrowing. You got way more money than you can imagine. It shows up every 2 weeks, just like magic. Don't borrow. I hope that's okay to share.
Absolutely. I am every other Friday right now. I spend 6 a.m. because this Navy Seabee active duty in Japan, it's about 9 o'clock at night for him. So we talk about his transition. And what he has done is he has saved about $40,000. And he's been in, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years. So he's got $40,000, which means that when he leaves the military, he doesn't have to take the first job that gets offered to him. He has a little bit of time to figure out how he's going to use his GI Bill benefits. He has time to really plan ahead, which is going to ensure his success. If he had gone out and bought that new car or that diamond ring or whatever, he wouldn't have that luxury, and now he would be panicking trying to figure out what he's going to do next. So buy yourself some time. If you go into, well, the military, right? I was going to say combat arms, but it's any position in the military, you have the potential to be injured or even killed. But you could plan on a 20-year career, and 2 weeks in, you get hurt. And now you're medically discharged. And the thing that was your life stream is now gone. So always have a plan for when you get out, whether it's 2 weeks from now or 20 years from now, but have a plan. Stay connected to the community, because it's life-saving to stay connected to the community. There was something else that was running through my mind, and I think you probably encapsulated it better.
Sorry,
So
I have a passion about that.
you're good. You're good. Anybody have any last-minute comments, questions? Zach, who's our speaker next time? Jerry is our speaker next time. All right. So that'll be good. We're going to learn what it's like to. Were you a WIZO? Is that the right term? RIO. What's that?
Radar intercept officer.
Radar intercept officer.
Naval flight officer, and I was Tomcat community for my career.
So got to land on and take off of these big floating ships in the ocean. Yeah, these they call aircraft carriers. Yeah, not a polar roller. Don, if I could ask you, would you take us out with God Bless America?
This song came out during the war. Kay Smith, Winter Irving, Berlin, great songwriter. The American people are ready for another patriotic song. He came up a week later and gave it to her. And she did the grand opening of it. It was wonderful. Get on the phone, ask for Kate Smith, and you'll hear it like you never heard it before. Sing it with me if you know it. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to